All right, well, I'll just jump right in. My topic is preventing challenging family life. And this is kind of an oxymoron. I don't think that it can be done, but as we've heard from Yvonne and from Jan, we can really try to minimize the conflict that we have in our lives. So the objectives of my talk are to identify some of the challenges that we face as families, some of the resources that can help us, identifying ways to minimize these challenges, and the importance of building a support network for all of us. Next slide. All right, this is my family. John is on the left-hand side. He's PWS by deletion, so he's one of the ones that is very fair, blonde-haired child. So I have 5 children. John is my youngest. He's 17. My oldest is going to be 30 this year. So a little bit about my story very quickly. I'm a registered nurse, so that's my story begins in the hospital. And then when I had John, as many of you mothers and fathers know, it's very difficult to manage a job and a household with a special needs individual, right? And for some individuals, this really strengthens a family and a partnership with my ex-husband. But in my story, it really drove us apart. So we got divorced when John was a little over a year old. And so for the rest of my children, this was really difficult in various ways. But in the end, it really cemented our relationships and taught all of us a lot about accepting people and how to deal with a lot of change and stress. Next slide. Oops. Some of the challenges families face with people with Prader-Willi syndrome: physical and emotional exhaustion. This is huge for me, being a single parent, having to work. I am physically exhausted by the end of the day. That wore down my threshold to deal with not only my John's tantrums, but my other children's needs as well. And the emotional exhaustion that all of us go through, I think, from time to time. It's so draining just having a special needs child, but then everything else that comes at your life. It's really hard. There's financial challenges, right? And some family members not accepting or understanding that of the child's diagnoses or the food restrictions or the tantrums they might have. It's really difficult to manage that. For me, Prader-Willi syndrome was really isolating. It really, I didn't have a lot of people to connect with. I was managing myself, my job, my other 4 children. And so friends and other colleagues of mine kind of had to take a back seat. And that's been difficult. Obviously, there's the behavioral challenges that some of our folks with Prader-Willi syndrome have. Inherently, there will be sibling conflict. John was the youngest. So for me, that meant the older kids really had to raise themselves, right? Because their needs had to take a back seat most of the time due to John's needs. And then, like I said, marital difficulties. For some, it's very strengthening. That partnership is wonderful and solidified. For me, it just didn't work out that way. So some of the challenges there. Next slide. What I found really helpful was just finding resources. This can be done hopefully in the comfort of your own bed, on your phone or on your computer at night when you have a few minutes of alone time. Just Google some things, right? IPWSO, you found us here. There's where I'm from, PWSA USA. There's also the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research and other organizations, Facebook groups, and community disability organizations. They might not be PW specific, but they're parents and families that are going through what you're going through. Next slide. How to prevent some challenges. Education. as parents, we know we're educating other people from the time our children are born, whether that be our own families, the school, other medical providers. So gather, if you can, enough information that you can share and you can help others understand. Preventing challenges, security, whether that is not only yourself, but your child's emotional security, the security of food, right? There's so many layers of security. We always think about food security, but it's also emotional, it's housing, it's food, it's all of these things. I think Yvonne and Jan touched on consistency, making sure that everybody kind of knows the program and that there aren't 5 different people telling the child 5 different things. Having clear expectations and boundaries, right, is important. And carving out some time for yourself and others in the family, even if that's just sitting down with another child or your spouse or your partner. How was your day type of thing, just making sure that they are also seen and felt and heard. And then communication is key. Communicating your own needs as a parent, but communicating between families, between friends, between schools and providers. Next slide. One of the main topics was education. Start with your immediate family. Some of those resources that we have on our website at IPWSO, other organizations, they have great downloadable education. You can print it off, read it, hand it out. That really helps people understand what the syndrome is about. Having routine family meetings, as maybe corny as that sounds, it was really important for me just to say, all right, you guys, here's what we're dealing with this week. How are we going to make this work? Because I can try to keep consistency in my child's life, but trying to do that in a big family, it's hard. So trying to make that consistency work really does take a lot of people. Having a game plan that everybody can follow, right? My game plan looked a little different than a lot of people's did. My son, John, is very behavioral. He has a lot of behaviors. So we always had a game plan for safety in the home or when we were outside. Next slide. Security. A food security plan. Whether you're at that point in your life where you're having to lock and alarm things, or some of my other kids had a locked, secure area in their own bedrooms. I did that too, right? Where I had a stash of food where I just knew that I could go and eat what I wanted and not have to worry about. A home security plan. For some of us, myself, I had to alarm or put sensors above my doors because John would walk out in the middle of the night. I had alarms not to keep people from entering my home, but to notify me when he was leaving the home. So for me, that was home security and knowing where my son was and that he was safe in the own home when I couldn't always have my eyes on him. And then also a community safety plan. There's things that you can put on your child's, shoelaces, or I had my neighbors all knew my son because he would break into their homes or he would be down the street in the middle of the night. My neighbors knew who he was, and that helped me from creating conflict with my neighbors because they knew about John. Next slide. I personally think consistency is one of the key factors in managing in Prader-Willi syndrome and avoiding conflict. Most people should be on the same page. If, like I said before, if you're hearing different things from mom or dad, or if I, as a person with Prader-Willi syndrome, know that if I don't get one answer, I can go to my brothers or sisters or my dad or my grandma and get a different answer. That creates a sense of insecurity, which leads to tantrums and a lot of conflict within the family. this is one thing that I struggled with. Don't give in to behaviors. This really has a snowball effect. I walk into a store. My typically developing children have a tantrum. I'm tired. I'm worn down, and they want a treat or they want a certain thing. I'm like, all right, just be quiet so we can get out. Here's your toy. We can't do that with people with Prader-Willi syndrome. And I wish I would have stuck to my guns and had more, not willpower, but enough energy to not give into the behaviors routinely. For me, that created a snowball effect of increased behaviors and increased violence. So I think Jan said her thing, I know, I accept, I am content. That's the fourth point here. The person with Prader-Willi syndrome, they thrive when they know what to expect, when they know what your answer is going to be and the structure of their day. Next slide. Consistency, we can go over this quickly in behavioral approach. I think clearly we need several weeks to discuss this. Don't continue or create a power struggle. And I think that was hard for me to teach to my own children, because sometimes our natural inclination is to say, you are wrong. There are ways to say that without creating a power struggle and creating behaviors and then family conflict. Much like Yvonne said, she is role modeling at a very early age how to deal with that and how to identify emotions and how to appropriately handle those emotions. She's building in these skills at a very early age, which for me was very hard to do consistently. Minimize using the word no, but rephrase that. Much like Yvonne said, hey, we're going to do this first. I would love to go for a walk with you, but let's brush your teeth first, then let's go out. Okay. Teaching yourself and your family members and your other children to stay calm is difficult. It is difficult to manage. And I find myself as a parent, I used to get really mad at my other kids. Why are you screaming at him? Now we're in a huge world of trouble. So making sure that, again, that communication between family members is happening too. And you're training, not only you're role modeling for your child, but for the other children, your spouse, the grandparents as well. Don't make threats. I would say, if you're acting up in the store, I will never bring you to a store ever again in your life. That's me. I'm maybe a bad parent, but I've said those words to all of my children at some point. But it's a little bit different with our folks with Prader-Willi syndrome. Don't make those threats unless you're gonna follow through. That creates, confusion and insecurity. And having empathy with the child doesn't mean that you're going to agree with them, the behavior, but you can understand where they're coming from. And like Jan said too, just trying to redirect and teaching others how to redirect with your child has been helpful. Next slide. Have clear expectations. Okay, behavioral expectations, routine expectations. As Yvonne does, model these expectations and let them know what they are. Sometimes you have to, for a typical functioning child, you can say, don't do that once, and they might get it. You might have to routinely do that for your individual with Prader-Willi syndrome. And sometimes using social stories helps them visualize that. Next slide. I said define boundaries, model them. You can use social stories, and our folks love praise. Who doesn't, right? So praise them when you see them. Wow, I love it. When you got upset, I saw you taking some deep breaths. That is so great. I'm so proud of you for not doing X, Y, and Z. You did a great job. And ask questions of them. They know. and they'll most of the time be able to tell you what's going on, if not in the moment, afterwards. Next slide. Communication. We talked about that with your partner, with your family, with the medical team, school, and with people in your community. It seems like a lot of communication. And I think that to me seems overwhelming when I'm just trying to get through the day. But this will help avoid conflict in all of these areas if you can communicate with these people and tell them what your needs and your child's needs are. Next slide. Try to take time for yourself, right? For many, I don't know, this is impossible for me. Carving out time, even if it's 5 minutes, really does help. And come up with some type of plan so that you are guaranteed 2 or 3 minutes a day, if nothing else. Make sure you're getting enough sleep, and so are your other family members. Utilize trusted family members so you can schedule time for yourself. When my parents were still alive, that was them. Can you watch John just for 20 minutes? I just need a timeout, right? And for some of us, we have community resources available, some respite services or special needs play groups. That helps for families. Next slide. Find joy. Sometimes for me, that was hard. I try to celebrate those little moments that we do have, no matter how small. I used to write them down in a book. Today, John did this. Okay, that's great. Today, I didn't get hit. Thank you, right? That was a small win for me. Practice radical acceptance. There are some things that I am just not going to change. Man, okay, I need to accept that. I embrace that, and I'm just going to move on. And try to be gentle with yourself. I think that for families, some people get so overwhelmed by trying to make sure they have the best individual with Prader-Willi syndrome, that they're hand making all of these crazy dinners for everyone and making sure their other kids are in sports and doing all these therapies. It's okay. Try to be gentle. You're doing the best you can, right? And it's okay to just, it's okay to take time for yourself. Next slide. And almost closing slide. These are I wish I wouldn't have isolated myself. If you, please don't do that. It's easy to do. I wish I would have asked for help when I was having trouble instead of thinking that I can take everything on. I wish I would have stuck to a meal plan. With 5 children, that was really hard. My kids' friends would come over and there was food everywhere. It was really hard. I wish I wouldn't have given into behaviors because I was too tired emotionally and physically. I wish I would have had these talks available to me to know how important developing a routine was, taking time for my own mental health. And I wish I would think maybe parents with other kids, we can realize this. I wish I would have talked to my other kids more. Sometimes that's hard. And don't enter into power struggle. The list goes on. I feel that my family's very close. So this may sound sort of doom and gloom, but my family, it really has helped. We're very a tight-knit family because of all the struggles that we went through. We didn't do it all right. And that's okay because we're where we are. And John is doing good. Next slide. No family is without challenges. That's why I kind of struggled with the whole topic of this. Even without John, my family has challenges every day. Prader-Willi syndrome can be a unique opportunity to unite, yet not divide the family. And that takes time. So what you can do is arm yourself with all the education you can, and build your family toolbox. Everybody should have special tools they can use to avoid conflict within themselves and within the family. Next. Oh, that's it. And now it's time for questions. I think I'm the done. And that is John. So, okay. There's just some links.